I'm Jane, 31 female. I live in a city that never sleeps, in a condo I bought with my own money, and I work a job that demands precision, logic, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. I'm a senior financial analyst, which means my entire life revolves around numbers making sense. For the longest time, the one place where the numbers never added up was my own family. I was the responsible one, the safety net, the emergency fund, and I thought that was my role, my duty. It took one outrageous demand for me to realize I wasn't a safety net. I was a doormat. This is the story of how I stopped letting my family walk all over me and finally secured my own future, even if it meant burning every bridge behind me. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. In my family, love was often measured in dollars and cents. It wasn't a conscious decision, not something we ever sat down and discussed, but it was an undercurrent that ran through every holiday, every birthday, and every crisis. My father, Patrick, a man whose hands were calloused from a lifetime of construction management, believed in providing. It was his core identity. Since my mother passed away a decade ago, that belief had hardened, calcifying into a rigid worldview where financial support was the highest form of affection. For him, a paid bill was a hug, and a cleared debt was an "I love you." I, in turn, learned this language fluently. I excelled in school, got scholarships, and climbed the corporate ladder with a relentless focus. I wanted to make him proud, yes, but I also wanted to speak his language, to show my love by being self-sufficient, and eventually, by being the one who could provide. My younger brother, Mark, learned a different dialect of this same language. He was the artist, the dreamer, the one who floated through life on a cloud of potential. He was 4 years my junior, and in my father's eyes, he was the one who needed protecting. While I was building a career, Mark was building a repertoire of songs in smoky bars. While I was saving for a down payment, he was saving up for a new guitar amp. My father saw this not as a lack of ambition, but as the noble struggle of a creative soul. And so, an unspoken agreement was forged. I would be the stable pillar, and Mark would be the beautiful vine that grew around it, supported by its strength. The family's financial well-being, its emergency fund, its future investments, they all fell to me. It started small. When Mark's car broke down, it was a given that I'd cover the repair. When he was short on rent, a quick transfer from my account was the unquestioned solution. Dad would call not to ask, but to inform. "Mark needs about $600 for his rent this month, Janie. Just take care of it." It was never framed as a loan. It was just what was done. To keep the peace, to keep the family engine running smoothly, I paid. I kept meticulous records in a private spreadsheet, a habit from my job. I initially labeled it loans to Mark, but after the first year, I tellingly renamed it family support. The total was staggering, a silent testament to years of one-sided generosity. It was the price of being the responsible daughter. The pinnacle of this arrangement was the joint savings account. When my mother passed, she left a modest life insurance policy. Dad, in a moment of what he probably considered profound wisdom, decided the money should be put into a high-yield savings account under both my name and his. "You're good with money, Jane," he'd said, his voice thick with grief. "You'll manage it. It's for the family's future." At the time, I was 21, and it felt like a sacred trust. Over the years, that account became the hub of my financial life. My bonuses went in there. A significant portion of my salary was automatically deposited. It was the account from which I was building my future, saving for the condo I dreamed of. I was the sole contributor, but in my father's mind, and by extension Mark's, it was the family money. This unspoken agreement also dictated our roles. I was the planner, the organizer, the one who remembered birthdays and scheduled Dad's doctor's appointments. Mark was the entertainment. He'd show up to family dinners with his guitar, play a few new songs, and charm everyone, effectively absolving himself of any real responsibility. He was fun, I was functional. He was the heart, I was the wallet. Dad would watch him play, a proud, misty look in his eyes, and I'd feel a familiar pang. A mix of pride for my brother's talent and a quiet resentment for the ease with which he moved through the world. The purchase of my condo should have been the moment the dynamic shifted. It was a 2-bedroom apartment in a new development with a small balcony overlooking a park. It was my dream. Financed by years of disciplined saving and savvy investing, all managed from that joint account. When I announced I was buying it, my father's reaction was lukewarm. "That's a lot of money, Jane. Are you sure you can handle it?" he'd asked, a frown creasing his brow. There was no congratulations, no pride in his daughter's accomplishment. There was only concern for the family's primary asset, the joint account. I had to sit him down with spreadsheets and financial projections to prove that I wasn't draining the family money, but merely using my portion of it. Even then, a subtle guilt was laid at my feet. "Just make sure you leave a healthy cushion in there," he'd warned. "You never know when Mark might have an emergency." The implication was clear. My home, my greatest personal achievement, was secondary to my brother's potential future needs. I put the deed in both my name and my father's. It was a mistake, born of a lifetime of conditioning. I told myself it was a practical matter. It would make inheritance easier down the line, a clean transfer without probate. But deep down, I knew the real reason. It was another offering to the family, another demonstration of my loyalty to the unspoken agreement. I owned the condo, but in my father's mind, it was another family asset that I was simply managing. It was my name on the mortgage, my salary paying for it every month, but it was still, in some intangible way, not entirely mine. It belonged to the family, just like my income, my time, and my future. And for years, I never thought to question it. I just kept paying, hoping that one day, my contributions would finally be seen for what they were. Love, not obligation. The beginning of the end started with a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a quarterly earnings report, my screen filled with complex data streams, when my personal phone buzzed. It was Mark. He rarely called me during the day unless he needed something, so my stomach tightened preemptively. "Janie, big news," he exclaimed, his voice practically vibrating with excitement. I could hear his girlfriend, Phoebe, giggling in the background. "Hey, Mark, what's up?" "I'm a little busy," I said, my eyes still scanning a row of figures. "Drop what you're doing, this is huge. I asked Phoebe to marry me last night. She said yes." A genuine smile touched my lips. Despite our complicated dynamic, I loved my brother. "Wow, Mark, that's amazing. Congratulations to both of you. That's really wonderful news." "Thanks, we're so excited. We're thinking a fall wedding, maybe next October. Phoebe has this whole vision board, it's going to be epic," he gushed. "Anyway, we should all celebrate. Dad's cooking his famous lasagna on Sunday, you have to come." For a moment, it felt normal. A happy family moment, a cause for celebration. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Maybe this was a turning point. Mark was settling down, taking on real responsibility. Maybe our relationship could finally shift into one of equals. I agreed to come on Sunday, my heart feeling lighter than it had in a long time. The rest of the week was filled with a flurry of texts from the newly engaged couple, photos of Phoebe's ring, a modest but pretty vintage piece, links to potential venues, and a shared Pinterest board overflowing with rustic chic wedding decor. It was all very sweet, and I allowed myself to get caught up in the excitement. Sunday arrived, and I walked into my father's house, the one I grew up in, armed with a bottle of expensive champagne and a genuinely happy heart. The smell of garlic and oregano filled the air. Dad gave me a gruff hug, and Mark and Phoebe were beaming, practically glowing with happiness. We sat down to dinner, and the conversation was light and cheerful. We toasted to the happy couple, and I listened as Phoebe described her dream wedding in breathless detail. A converted barn upstate, a string quartet, a catered dinner for 150 guests, and a 10-day honeymoon in Tuscany. It sounded incredibly ambitious, and, I noted with the silent calculation of an analyst, incredibly expensive. "That sounds beautiful, Phoebe," I said, trying to keep the financial alarm bells from ringing audibly in my voice. Have you guys started to think about a budget? Mark waved his hand dismissively. We're working on it. That's actually one of the things we wanted to talk to you and Dad about tonight. I felt that familiar tightening in my stomach again. Here it was. My father, Patrick, cleared his throat, setting down his fork. He took on his serious, family patriarch tone. Jane, Mark and Phoebe have some big plans, and they're going to need our help to get started on the right foot. I nodded slowly. Of course. I'd be happy to help you two set up a savings plan, maybe look at some wedding-specific investment options. Mark cut me off with a short, sharp laugh. No, Janie, we're not talking about a savings plan. He exchanged a look with PH. Obe, who gave him an encouraging little nod. He took a deep breath and looked me straight in the eye. We're talking about you paying for it. The silence in the room was immediate and heavy. I must have misheard him. I'm sorry, what did you just say? The wedding, he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Phoebe and I have estimated the costs. With the venue, the catering, the honeymoon, it's going to be around $60,000. You'll be paying for it. It's only fair. I stared at him, dumbfounded. The casual entitlement in his voice was staggering. I looked at my father, expecting him to intervene, to tell Mark how ridiculous he was being. But Patrick just sat there, his expression unreadable, waiting for my response. Fair, I finally managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. Mark, how could that possibly be fair? That's a huge amount of money. Well, you're the one with all the money, Mark said, his tone shifting from cheerful to defensive. You've got that fancy job and your new condo. I'm a struggling artist. Phoebe is just starting her career. We can't afford a wedding like this on our own, and Phoebe deserves to have her dream day. You've always taken care of things. This is just a bigger thing. A bigger thing? Mark, this isn't like covering your rent or fixing your car. This is $60,000. I have my own life, my own mortgage to pay. My voice was rising, laced with years of pent-up frustration. Phoebe chimed in, her voice syrupy sweet. We thought of it as an early wedding gift, Jane, a really, really generous one, and an investment in our future happiness. An investment. The word hit me like a slap. My hard-earned money wasn't a gift, it was an asset to be leveraged for their future happiness. Suddenly, all the small resentments, the hundreds of ignored loans, the thankless sacrifices, they all coalesced into a cold, hard knot of anger in my chest. No, I said, my voice firm and clear. Absolutely not. I will not be paying $60,000 for your wedding. Mark's face turned red. What do you mean no, after everything Dad and I have done for you? Done for me? I laughed, a bitter, incredulous sound. What exactly have you done for me, Mark? Besides providing me with a constant financial drain for the last decade. That's when my father slammed his fist on the table. The plates and glasses jumped. Jane, that's enough, he boomed, his face a mask of fury. You will not speak to your brother that way. He is getting married. This is what family does. We support each other. You have the money in that account. You will give it to him. It wasn't a request. It was an order. He was talking about the joint account. My account. The money I had saved, dollar by painful dollar. It's not the money, Dad. It's my money. I earned it. And I am not using it to fund a lavish party. It's the family account, Patrick shouted, getting to his feet. It's there for times like this, for family needs. My brother wanting a rustic chic wedding is not a family need, I shouted back, standing up to face him. A medical emergency is a need. Losing a job is a need. This is a want. An entitled, ridiculous want. The air was thick with tension. Mark and Phoebe looked shocked that I was actually fighting back. My father's face grew darker with every word I spoke. He took a step toward me, his finger jabbing the air. I am your father, and I am telling you to do this. You have a duty to your brother. My duty doesn't extend to bankrupting myself for his fantasy wedding. Then you're no daughter of mine, he spat, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. If you refuse to help your brother, if you turn your back on this family after everything we've given you, then don't bother coming home again. You'll be on your own. The ultimatum hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room. It was the ultimate weapon in his arsenal, the one he had wielded subtly for years but had now laid bare. My place in the family was conditional, it was transactional, and the price had just become too high. For the first time in my life, the fog of obligation began to clear, and I saw the dynamic for what it was, not love, but exploitation. I looked at my father's furious face, my brother's expectant one, and I felt something inside me snap. "Fine," I said, my voice dangerously calm. I picked up my purse from the chair. "If that's the choice, I've made my decision." I turned and walked out the door, leaving the scent of lasagna and the wreckage of my family behind me. The unspoken agreement was finally broken, and I knew exactly what I had to do next. The drive back to my condo was a blur of streetlights and simmering rage. My father's words echoed in my head. "Don't bother coming home again." Home, the word felt hollow. The house I had just left, the place filled with childhood memories, had ceased to be a home and had revealed itself as a headquarters for a business in which I was the sole, unwilling investor. My real home, the one I was driving toward, was the condo. My sanctuary. And a chilling thought suddenly pierced through my anger. The deed to my sanctuary had my father's name on it. It was another chain, another point of leverage he held over me. When I got inside, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the dark apartment to the large window in my living room and looked out at the city lights. The view, which usually filled me with a sense of pride and accomplishment, now felt precarious. How had I let it get this far? How had I become so enmeshed in their financial lives that they felt they had a right to my future? The answer, I knew, lay in the past. My mother's death had been the cataclysm that reshaped our family's landscape. Before she got sick, things were different. She was the family's emotional core, the one who balanced my father's gruff pragmatism. She saw me, truly saw me. She praised my report cards, but she also praised my kindness. She encouraged Mark's music, but she also made him do his chores. She understood that love wasn't about money, it was about presence, support, and mutual respect. Her love was unconditional. My father's, I was just realizing, came with a price tag. After she was gone, Dad was adrift. He threw himself into his work and into parenting the only way he knew how, by providing. I was 18, heading to college on a scholarship. Mark was 14, suddenly a quiet and withdrawn teenager. Dad's solution was to give us things. He co-signed for my first credit card with a high limit for emergencies. He bought Mark the best guitars, the most expensive amps, anything to bring a smile back to his face. It was his way of grieving, of trying to fill the enormous void Mom had left. I understood it then, and I tried to help. I took on a part-time job in college not just for spending money, but to send cash home to help with bills, to lessen Dad's burden. That was the beginning of the pattern. I became the second provider. When Dad's construction business slowed during a recession, I was the one who quietly transferred money to him, telling him it was a return on an investment he'd made in my education. He never questioned it. He just accepted it. It was easier for him to see me as a financial asset than as a daughter trying to care for her grieving father. Mark, on the other hand, was placed on a pedestal of fragility. He was the sensitive one who was still processing Mom's death, even years later. This narrative, spun by my father, became Mark's shield. It protected him from responsibility, from expectation, from the harsh realities of life. Any failure was excused, any request was justified. His part-time jobs never lasted long. He was always on the verge of his big break, a record deal that was just around the corner, a tour that was almost booked. In the meantime, I was expected to finance the dream. I remembered one particularly galling incident from a few years back. Mark had decided to record a demo album. He needed studio time, a producer, session musicians. The cost was close to $10,000. He and Dad had presented it to me as a family investment. "When I get signed, you'll get it all back tenfold," Mark had promised, his eyes shining with unearned confidence. I was hesitant, but Dad had applied the usual pressure. "Don't stand in the way of your brother's dream, Jane. Your mother would have wanted you to support him." The mention of my mother was his trump card, and he used it masterfully. It was emotional blackmail wrapped in a cloak of sentimentality. I gave him the money. The demo was recorded. Nothing came of it. It sat on a streaming service with a few dozen plays, most of them from me and my Aunt Elsie. The $10,000 was never mentioned again. It was just absorbed into the black hole of family support. My Aunt Elsie, my mother's sister, was the only one who saw the dynamic clearly. She was a librarian, quiet, observant, and fiercely intelligent. She lived a few states away, but we spoke on the phone every week. She had warned me for years in her gentle way. "You're too good to them, Jane," she'd say. "Your father enables Mark, and you enable them both. Your mother would have wanted you to build your own life, not just finance theirs." I would always deflect, making excuses for them. "It's just until Mark gets on his feet," I'd say, a line that had long since lost its meaning. Thinking of Elsie now, sitting in my dark apartment, I felt a wave of shame. She had been right all along. This wasn't support, it was a system of dependency, and I was its primary fuel source. My father wasn't protecting Mark. He was crippling him, teaching him that he never had to stand on his own 2 feet because his sister would always be there to catch him, or rather to prop him up. And me? I wasn't being a good daughter or a loving sister. I was being a fool. The demand for the wedding money wasn't an isolated incident. It was the logical, monstrous conclusion of a pattern I had allowed to continue for more than a decade. Every small concession, every paid bill, every ignored loan had paved the way for this moment. I had taught them how to treat me. I had shown them that my boundaries were flexible, my resources were communal, and my future was negotiable. The ultimatum my father had issued wasn't just about the wedding. It was a test of my compliance. He expected me to fold, to apologize, to come back begging for forgiveness with a check in my hand. He expected the past to repeat itself because it always had. But sitting there, with the city humming below, something shifted inside me. The anger began to cool, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. The echoes of the past were no longer a source of guilt. They were a roadmap of my mistakes. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would not make them again. They thought they knew me. They thought I was the dutiful daughter, the endless well of cash. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I was a financial analyst, and it was time for an audit. Monday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My voice was steady, but my mind was a whirlwind of activity. I told my boss I had a sudden personal matter to attend to, which was the truest statement I had ever made. My personal matter was the complete and total disentanglement of my life from my family's grasp. The rage from Sunday night had solidified into a plan, a series of logical, sequential steps. This was my world, the world of numbers and consequences, and I was about to introduce my family to it. My first step was to open the spreadsheet I had so grimly named Family Support. I hadn't looked at it in months, afraid to face the total. Now I opened it with a sense of grim purpose. For the next 2 hours, I went through years of my bank statements, credit card bills, and transaction histories, cross-referencing every entry. I was meticulous. I added dates, descriptions, and categorized each expense. Mark's rent, Mark's car insurance, Mark's emergency trip to Austin for a music festival, the $10,000 for the failed demo album, small transfers to my dad's account when his pension was tight. Every entry was a small cut, a tiny surrender of my own financial freedom. As I worked, the numbers on the screen grew, climbing higher and higher. It was one thing to know you were spending a lot. It was another to see it laid out in black and white, an undeniable record of exploitation. By the time I was done, the total at the bottom of the column made my breath catch in my throat. Over the last 10 years, I had given my brother and father a verified, documented total of $97,450. It was a staggering sum. It was a down payment on a larger house. It was an investment portfolio that could have secured my retirement. It was a life I had deferred in favor of theirs. But the number itself wasn't what shocked me the most. It was the lies attached to it. So many of the larger withdrawals had been framed as crises. I started a new tab on the spreadsheet, the Ledger of Lies. I began my investigation with the demo album. I had the name of the recording studio from the invoice Mark had proudly shown me back then. I found their website and gave them a call. Posing as a prospective client, I asked about their rates for a full demo package. The number they quoted was just over $5,000. I had given Mark 10. Where had the other 5,000 gone? My mind started racing. I remembered around that same time, Phoebe had posted photos on her social media from a surprise trip to Cancun. At the time, Mark had told me a friend of his had won the trip and given it to them. Looking at the dates, it lined up perfectly with the week after I had transferred him the money for the studio. A sick feeling began to pool in my stomach. I scrolled back through years of Phoebe's public profiles, my spreadsheet open on a second monitor. A pattern began to emerge. A few days after I would send Mark a large sum for an emergency car repair, Phoebe would post a new designer handbag. When I sent money for what Mark claimed were unexpected medical bills, for a sprained ankle, a new high-end laptop appeared in their apartment photos. It was brazen. They weren't even trying to hide it. They had simply assumed I would never look, that I would never question their stories, that I would remain their willing, ignorant benefactor. Each discovery was like a separate betrayal, layering on top of the original demand. This wasn't just entitlement, it was calculated deception. The next front of my investigation was the condo. My name was on the mortgage, but my father S. was on the deed alongside mine. I had done it to appease him, to show him that it was a family asset. Now, that decision felt incredibly naive. I called the lawyer who had handled the closing. I explained the situation vaguely, saying I wanted to understand my options for removing a name from a joint tenancy deed. He explained the process. My father would have to sign a quitclaim deed, voluntarily relinquishing his share of the property to me. Given our last conversation, the chances of that happening were zero. Is there any other way? I asked, my heart sinking. If he won't sign, you'd have to force a partition sale through the courts, the lawyer explained. It's messy, expensive, and you could be forced to sell the property. Your best bet is to convince him. I hung up the phone, a cold dread washing over me. They had me trapped. My home wasn't truly mine. But then my analyst brain kicked in. I had paid the down payment. I had made every single mortgage payment from my personal funds, which I could prove. He had never contributed a single cent. While his name was on the deed, he had no financial stake in the property. This was my leverage. A legal battle would be messy, but the paper trail was overwhelmingly in my favor. He might be able to cause problems, but he wouldn't win. The final piece of the puzzle was the joint account. The account my father had called the family account. I logged into my online banking portal. This was the hub of the entire operation, the source of their power over me. It held the remainder of my life savings, the money I had carefully rebuilt after the condo purchase. It was a substantial amount, my cushion, my security, and both my father and I had full access to it. He could, in theory, walk into a branch and withdraw every last penny. The thought sent a jolt of panic through me. I had to act, and I had to act fast. By the end of the day, I had a complete picture. The family support spreadsheet was my evidence. The social media posts were corroboration. The condo deed was my battleground, and the joint account was the asset I had to protect above all else. I spent the rest of the evening drafting emails, saving screenshots, and printing out bank statements. My living room, once a peaceful sanctuary, now looked like a war room. I was no longer the grieving daughter or the supportive sister. I was a plaintiff, building a case against my own family. The ledger was complete. It wasn't just a record of money, it was a record of their deceit and my complicity. And now, it was going to be my weapon. Tuesday morning, I woke up before my alarm, my mind sharp and clear. The emotional turmoil of the weekend had been replaced by the focused calm that comes with having a definitive plan. There would be no more shouting matches, no more tearful appeals, no more capitulation. My response would be silent, swift, and executed with the precision of a market trade. My first order of business was securing my money. The joint savings account was the biggest vulnerability. Before my father could even think of retaliating by draining it, I had to move the funds. I logged into my online banking portal. My heart hammered against my ribs as I initiated the transfer. I created a new savings account at the same bank, solely in my name. The process took less than 5 minutes. I filled in the amount, the entire balance of the joint account, down to the last cent. I paused for a beat, my cursor hovering over the Confirm Transfer button. This was the point of no return. This was the action that would incinerate the last remaining bridge. I clicked the button. A confirmation screen appeared. Your transfer has been successfully completed. A wave of relief, so profound it almost made me dizzy, washed over me. The money was safe. It was mine. Next, I closed the account. I used the bank's secure messaging feature to submit the request. Reason for closing: account no longer needed. It felt like a massive understatement. With a few more clicks, the account that had tethered me to my family's financial whims for over a decade was sked. Old for closure. It would be gone by the end of the business day. Step 2 was the condo. My conversation with the lawyer had made it clear that a voluntary signature was the cleanest path. Patrick would never agree if I asked him directly, so I had to frame it in a way that appealed to his own self-interest, or at least, in a way that presented him with no other logical choice. I spent an hour composing a carefully worded email to him and Mark. I attached the family support spreadsheet, now cleaned up and formatted into a professional-looking report. The subject line was simple: regarding our finances and the condo. The email began without sentiment. Patrick Mark, I wrote, following our conversation on Sunday, I have undertaken a full review of my financial contributions to the family over the past 10 years. The attached document provides a detailed, itemized breakdown of these contributions, which total $97,450. This figure does not include interest. I continued, it has become clear that our understanding of financial boundaries is fundamentally different. Therefore, I am making some immediate changes to protect my financial future. As of this morning, the joint savings account has been closed, and all funds have been moved to a new account under my sole ownership. This was the part I had to get exactly right. Regarding the condo at 123 Maple Street, as you know, your name, Patrick, is on the deed as a joint tenant. However, 100% of the down payment, closing costs, and all subsequent mortgage payments have been made by me from my personal income. I have a complete record of these payments. I have consulted with legal counsel, and I intend to have the deed changed to reflect sole ownership. The cleanest way to do this is for you to sign a quitclaim deed, transferring your interest to me. I have had the document drawn up, and it will be delivered to you via courier tomorrow. Then came the implicit threat. Should you refuse to sign, I will be forced to initiate a partition action in court. Given that you have zero financial equity in the property, the legal precedent is overwhelmingly in my favor. The court will almost certainly grant me sole title. However, the process will be public, lengthy, and expensive. It will also create a public record of the financial history detailed in the attached spreadsheet. I believe it is in everyone's best interest to resolve this matter amicably and privately by signing the document. I finished the email with a cold finality. I consider this my final communication on the matter. The quitclaim deed will arrive with a postage-paid return envelope. I expect it to be signed and returned within 5 business days. I didn't say love or sincerely or even Jane. I just ended it. I attached the spreadsheet, took a deep breath, and hit send. The silence that followed felt enormous. I had launched a preemptive strike, and now all I could do was wait for the fallout. I spent the rest of the day in a strange state of limbo. I tried to work from home, but I couldn't focus. I kept checking my phone, my email, expecting an explosion. But there was nothing. No angry calls, no furious texts, just silence. It was more unnerving than the shouting. It meant they were thinking, planning their counterattack. That evening, my Aunt Elsie called. My father must have contacted her. Her voice was calm and steady, a welcome anchor in my storm. "I heard what happened, Jane," she said softly. "Your father called me. He's beside himself." "What did he say?" I asked, bracing myself. "A lot of shouting. He said you stole the family money, and you're trying to kick him out of his own property." He's spinning a tale of a selfish, ungrateful daughter. I sighed. Of course he is. Did you tell him his name is on the deed as a favor and he's never paid a dime towards it? I did, Elsie said. He didn't like hearing that. He said you've betrayed them. He told me about the email and the spreadsheet. He called it a book of lies. It's 10 years of bank statements, Elsie. The only lies are the ones they told me to get the money. There was a pause on the line. I know, dear, she said, her voice filled with a warmth that I hadn't realized how much I was missing. I'm so proud of you. This must have been incredibly difficult, but you did the right thing. You drew a line. Your mother, she would have been so proud of the strong woman you've become. Her words were like a balm on a raw wound. Hearing her say that, hearing her invoke my mother's memory not as a tool for manipulation, but as a source of strength, fortified my resolve. We talked for another hour. I explained my plan, the steps I had taken. She listened patiently, offering not advice but unwavering support. She was my only ally, the only family I had left, and in that moment, she was all I needed. When I hung up the phone, the fear had vanished, replaced by a sense of profound peace. I had drawn the line. I had taken back control of my life, my finances, and my future. Whatever storm was coming, I was ready to face it. I had my evidence, I had my plan, and for the first time in a very long time, I had my own back. I turned off my phone, made a cup of tea, and sat in the quiet of my condo, and waited for the morning. I had expected a fight. I had anticipated screaming phone calls, threatening text messages, maybe even an unannounced visit from my father, his face red with fury. What I got was silence. All day Wednesday, not a word. The courier confirmed the quitclaim deed had been delivered and signed for by my father at 10:15 a.m. The 5-day countdown had begun. The silence was a strategic move, I realized. They were trying to make me sweat, to make me doubt my own resolve. They thought if they ignored me long enough, I would crack, that my lifetime of conditioning would kick in and I'd come crawling back, apologizing for the chaos I had caused. It was a profound miscalculation. The silence didn't make me anxious, it made me angry. It was the ultimate dismissal, a final, passive-aggressive confirmation that my feelings, my perspective, my decade of sacrifice meant nothing to them. They weren't even willing to engage with the truth I had laid at their feet. They just pretended it didn't exist. On Thursday, the silence was broken, but not in the way I expected. A text message from a number I didn't recognize popped up on my screen. It was a screenshot of a social media post from Phoebe. She had posted a long, rambling diatribe on her Facebook page, which was set to public. It was a masterclass in victimhood. Feeling so heartbroken, the post began, accompanied by a filtered photo of her looking wistfully out a window. Mark and I have been so excited to start our lives together, but we've been hit with some truly cruel and selfish behavior from a family member who we thought would be our biggest supporter. She didn't use my name, but it was obvious who she was talking about. The post went on to paint a picture of a jealous, bitter sister who was hoarding family money and trying to ruin our dream wedding out of spite. She twisted the narrative expertly, claiming I had promised to pay for the wedding and then reneged at the last minute, throwing their plans into chaos. She mentioned a fake, hurtful document I had sent to bully and intimidate them. The comments section was a predictable flood of sympathy. Friends and distant relatives chimed in with "OMG, that's horrible," and "some people are just toxic, cut them out," and "don't let her ruin your special day." My blood ran cold as I read it. She was trying to poison the well, to isolate me from the wider family and control the story before I even had a chance to tell it. This was war, and they were launching a public relations campaign. I took screenshots of everything, the post, the comments, and saved them to my evidence folder. I didn't reply. I didn't engage. A public fight would only make me look as unhinged as them. My response would remain in the legal and financial realm. Friday came and went. Still no signed deed. The weekend passed in a tense quiet. By now, I was certain my father wasn't going to sign. He was going to call my bluff, forcing me to take him to court. He was counting on me not having the stomach for a public family battle. On Monday morning, my self-imposed 5-day deadline expired. I called my lawyer. He hasn't returned the deed, I said, my voice flat. It's time to file the partition suit. Are you sure, Jane? He asked. Once we file, there's no going back. It will get ugly. I'm sure, I replied. They've left me no other choice. They're smearing me all over social media. The time for being amicable is over. He agreed to file the paperwork by the end of the day. I hung up the phone and felt a strange sense of finality. The decision was made. The path was set. And then, at 11:30 p.m. that night, my phone started to ring. It was my father. I ignored it. It rang again. I ignored it. Then a text came through. Call me now, urgent. A minute later, Mark called. I ignored that too. Then Phoebe. Then my father again. The calls came one after another, a frantic, desperate barrage. My phone screen lit up relentlessly. They were in a panic. But why now? The lawsuit wouldn't have even been processed yet. Something else had happened. My curiosity got the better of me. I silenced my phone but watched the screen. Call after call. Text after text. They were coming in so fast I couldn't even read them. It was an electronic siege. After 20 minutes of this relentless assault, a text from Mark finally caught my eye. It was just a string of panicked words. Dad is at the hospital. He had a panic attack. What did you do? My heart leaped into my throat. For a split second, guilt and fear washed over me. Was this my fault? Had I pushed him too far? But then the analyst in me took over. A panic attack. Not a heart attack. Not a stroke. A panic attack. And it had happened hours after the deadline for the deed had passed, on the very day I had told them I would take legal action. The timing was too perfect. It was a ploy. It had to be. A desperate, last-ditch attempt to manipulate me with guilt, to pull me back into the drama and regain control. I thought of my Aunt Elsie's words. Your father enables Mark, and you enable them both. Rushing to the hospital would be the ultimate act of enablement. It would tell them that their tactics still worked, that a manufactured crisis was all it took to break my resolve. I turned my phone completely off. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I chose my own peace over their chaos. I went into my bedroom, closed the door, and shut out the noise. The silence in my apartment was absolute. Outside, the storm of their creation could rage all it wanted. Inside, I was finally safe. I didn't sleep much that night, but it wasn't from worry. It was from the adrenaline of a battle finally won. I didn't know what the morning would bring, but I knew I would face it on my own terms. The old Jane was gone. The new one didn't respond to manufactured emergencies. I would wake up when my alarm told me to, and not a moment sooner. I woke up the next morning feeling as though I had surfaced from deep underwater. The first thing I did was turn on my phone. It buzzed and vibrated for nearly a full minute as a backlog of notifications flooded in. 67 missed calls, 42 text messages, a dozen voicemails. It was a digital monument to their desperation. I made myself a coffee and sat down to review the carnage. The texts were a frantic progression from anger to pleading. Jane, pick up the phone. Dad is asking for you. How can you be so heartless? Your father is in the hospital because of you. Phoebe and I are here. The doctors are worried. Fine, be that way, but you'll regret this. And then the tone shifted. Jane, please, we need to talk. This has gone too far. Just call us. We can sort this out. Forget the lawsuit. Dad is stable. He wants to sign the papers. Just come to the hospital. The last message was the tell. He wants to sign the papers. The entire medical emergency had been a high-stakes negotiation tactic. They had created a crisis, hoping to leverage my guilt into a position of power, and when I didn't take the bait, their entire strategy collapsed. They had overplayed their hand, and now they were folding. I called my lawyer before I did anything else. They're claiming Patrick had a panic attack and is in the hospital, I told him, and they're suddenly very eager to have him sign the quitclaim deed. My lawyer was silent for a moment. It's a trap, Jane, he said, his voice serious. Don't go to that hospital. They want to get you into a room with them to create a high-pressure, emotional environment where they can manipulate you. We'll handle this on our own terms. He was right, I wasn't walking back into that lion's den. "What do we do?" I asked. "I'll dispatch a notary to the hospital," he said. "They are impartial, and their presence will prevent any funny business. They will witness your father's signature and take possession of the document. You will not be present. You will not speak to them. We do this by the book." It was a brilliant plan. It removed me from the emotional equation entirely. I gave him the hospital information Mark had texted me in his panic, and my lawyer got to work. 2 hours later, he called me back. "It's done," he said. "The notary met with your father. Mark and his fiancée were there and tried to argue, but the notary was firm. Patrick signed the deed. It's been notarized and is on its way to my office. The condo is yours, Jane, solely and completely." I hung up the phone and burst into tears. It wasn't sadness or anger. It was the gut-wrenching release of a decade of stress and obligation. It was over. I was free. The next few weeks were quiet. I filed the new deed with the county clerk's office. I set up my new bank accounts and automatic bill payments, creating a financial ecosystem that was entirely my own. I blocked my father, Mark, and Phoebe on my phone and all social media. I needed a clean break, a period of absolute silence to heal. My Aunt Elsie became my rock. We spoke every day. She told me the rest of the story in bits and pieces. Patrick had been discharged from the hospital the same afternoon he signed the deed. There was no serious medical issue. The panic attack was, as I suspected, a performance. The wedding was officially postponed, which we both knew was code for canceled. Phoebe's social media went from heartbroken bride-to-be to a string of vague, inspirational quotes about new beginnings. The rumor was that her parents, who were respectable people, got wind of the real story and were horrified by the idea of their daughter marrying into a family that engaged in such blatant financial manipulation. Without my money, the dream wedding evaporated, and apparently, so did Phoebe's commitment to Mark. About a month later, a letter arrived. It was from my father. My first instinct was to throw it away, but I opened it. It was a rambling, self-pitying 2 pages. He accused me of destroying the family, of abandoning him and my brother, of being cold and unloving. He never once acknowledged the money, the lies, or his own behavior. Tucked inside the letter was a check for $500. The memo line read, "For what it's worth." It was a pathetic gesture, an attempt to buy a clear conscience for a fraction of a percent of what they had taken. It was the final confirmation that he would never understand, never change. I didn't cash the check. Instead, I scanned it and sent the image to my lawyer to keep with my file, just in case. Then I tore the original check and the letter into tiny pieces and let them fall into the trash. It's been a year now. I haven't spoken to my father or brother since that night. I hear through my aunt that Mark has a full-time job now, working in a warehouse. He had no choice but to grow up. My father is quiet and keeps to himself. Sometimes, I feel a pang of sadness for the family I wish I had, but it's quickly replaced by a profound sense of peace. My life is my own now. My condo, which I've redecorated, is filled with light and plants. My finances are thriving. I'm planning a trip to Italy next year, my own dream, on my own dime. I've started dating someone, a kind man who celebrates my success and respects my boundaries. The other day, I was looking at my net worth statement. The numbers made sense. They were a reflection of my work, my discipline, and my choices. I finally realized that my father was right about one thing: financial support can be a form of love, but true love is reciprocal. It's an investment you make in each other, not a debt one person is forced to pay. I had been balancing my family's books for my entire adult life, and now, finally, my own ledger was clear. My foundation was rebuilt, and this time, it was on solid ground with only one name on the deed: mine.